Good afternoon, everybody. I wanted to share. I was spending time with God this morning, and as I was spending time in my quiet place, I asked Him what was His word that He wanted me to read today, and He took me to the book of Ruth. I've never read this book before, and but it was such very short. There's only four chapters, very short chapters, but it's so profound. It's the great I believe great grandmother of Jesus Christ. Um I'm gonna read. This is what the intro of the book of Ruth. The short book of Ruth is a bridge between the two major parts of the Israel's covenant history. The first part, Genesis to Judges, focuses on how Abraham's descendants became a nation and on the covenant God made with Israel. The second part, Samuel to Kings, tells the story of the nation's kings and the covenant God made with David as the head of Israel's royal line. Ruth helps the transition by opening in the days of the judges and ending with the genealogy of David. The book appears to have been written to defend David's right to be king. He was the great grandson of a Moabite named Ruth. Great grandson, then. Because the people of Moab didn't help the Israelites when they came out of Egypt, the law didn't permit any descendants of a Moabite to join Israel down to the 10th generation. If they couldn't even join the community, how could one of them serve as king? This book is set up like a drama or stage play. Each scene features a short introduction and then dialogue between the characters. The book ends with a 10 generation genealogy leading up to David. So the form of the book mirrors its purpose, which is to show that genuine faith was present in a woman from a nation whose descendants were normally excluded for 10 generations. The book also shows how God's purposes are accomplished in the world. God's good law allowing the poor to collect grain in the fields, his providence over events, and the personal kindness of people all combine to help the story find the redemptive conclusion. This is amazing because when you start from the first chapter, you find that Ruth was actually married to one of Naomi's sons, and then her husband, Naomi's son, ended up passing away first, and then two of her sons. So she was gonna leave and head back to Bethlehem, and her daughter-in-laws was going to follow her, but she didn't want them to follow. She wanted them to stay back and possibly get remarried again. Well, one of them stayed back, but Ruth told Naomi that wherever Naomi would go, Ruth was going to follow her. Wherever she would die is where she would die. Long story short, Ruth ended up going back to Bethlehem with Naomi, but keep in mind, Ruth was a Moabite. And as the introduction was explaining, because the Moabites didn't help the Israelites when they came out of Egypt, they was prohibited from entering Israel. So though that was like 10 generations back. Um, so you fast forward to now Ruth, the daughter-in-law of Naomi, now going back to Bethlehem after both their husbands pass. So Naomi ends up seeing Boaz, her not her ex-husband, but her her former husband, he passed away, his cousin Boaz, who was a lot older than Ruth, but because Ruth took care of Naomi in the fashion that she did, she got favor from Boaz, who owned a field of grains, and he would allow Naomi to come behind his servants as they were picking grain from the field, and anything that fell, he allowed her to take for her. Long story short, they end up getting married, Boaz and Ruth, and they end up getting, I believe, Obed, and then Obed gets Jesse, and Jesse gets David, who becomes the king. And the rest is history, right? Because Jesus Christ comes out of that line. When you look at everything and the story of Ruth and how her people was prohibited to enter Israel again, 10 generations long, and then here she comes pure, and she was told that when Naomi came, she left because she was saddened. She lost her husband and her 2 sons. But in the end of the book of Ruth, you find that she still had favor with God, because Ruth ended up marrying Boaz, ended up getting a baby, Obed, and she had a line again. So she was able to have grandchildren under her, let alone King David, and then down the line, Jesus Christ. And it doesn't matter what the world might say, it doesn't matter what man might say, it doesn't even matter what the law might say, because when God intervenes, it changes everything. And it was her heart and her faithfulness, Ruth's heart and her faithfulness and her obedience is what opened up the separation between her people and Israel again. I hope this blesses somebody. You folks be blessed.